the intention, as we said at the beginning of the day, was to try and get as many perspectives on the table, to try and make you think differently. And if you read all the emails that we flooded you with before the event, we said we hope you'll never think the same about telecoms again. It did occur to me, by the way, that we put the message out there that yes, there's some negativity around the size of the market and the growth of the market. And I was listening to a program during the week on Radio 4, and there was some Churchill quotes. And he was talking about how Churchill would go and annotate his quotes and change them to make him more powerful. And the one which he was read out, which I thought was certainly relevant to our telecoms industry. And someone said to Churchill, "Is this the end?" And I won't even try and do a Churchillian mimic, but he said, "No, this is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. It's the end of the beginning." And I think it's relevant to this industry where we do get hung up, especially on the analyst side, about it's starting to flatten off, and then there's no new growth, and 5G won't do this and won't do that. Was actually the relevance of what the communications industry does today is just spreading, whether it's ubiquitous or who knows, but it's spreading more and more across all aspects of our lives, of industry, of business, and of many of those things behind the scenes that perhaps we'll talk about later in the debate this afternoon. So just trying to make people think a little bit differently about it. What I'd like to do now is, before we move into the afternoon debates, which are going to be on the software-shaped telco, IoT, 5G, and then an analyst wrap-up before we have drinks. I'm delighted to say that Peter Day, who worked for said BBC Radio 4, who was with us last year, agreed to come along and just use his journalistic skills just to summarise for us what he heard this morning. So it was important that we heard from Mark Gregory as an outsider looking at it from an economics point of view. I'm now delighted to welcome to the stage Peter Day to give us a journalistic perspective on what he heard this morning. Peter.
Thank you very much. My annual injection of telcos is rather wonderful. I am a complete outsider. I know nothing, as my mother used to say about my wife. She's Dutch. She knows nothing, she said. The way we experience the world is changing, and that bouncy microphone would have transformed my job. Imagine interviewing Bill Gates with it and throwing it from hand to hand as we went through the interview. He'd probably storm out, wouldn't he? Anyway, I met earlier this year Andy Bechtolsheim, the co-founder of Sun Microsystems and now multiple serial entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and he observed to me that Tom Watson Jr., the head of IBM, is supposed to have said in about 1950 that there was only room in the world for about 6 computers, 6 big, old mainframe computers. And for decade after decade, if he actually said that, and it's difficult to pin it down, he was pilloried for this ridiculous remark. And now, said Bechtolsheim, we've got Google, and we've got Amazon, and we've got Microsoft Azure. We're going to get back to that world of 6 computers for the whole world. I found that a very potent remark, a new nervous system for the whole world based on the cloud. And what's the role of the telcos? There still seems to be a lot of uncertainty about it, as Chris said at the start, about how all these things fit together, and I found that fascinating this morning. In the first session, an extraordinary contrast of views. The economist Mark Gregory talked about telcos' huge appetite for capital and the destruction of value we've seen there, and he asked a potent question: how can the telcos create new forms of value? And this intruded the rather prickly question of value into this event rather earlier than is usual. He also said the challenge isn't digital, it's how you deal with the legacy, and there's another elephant in the room. And then Marcus Weldon of Nokia Bell Labs was enthralling when he talked about the speed of the light as a new era for human interactivity. But the economic conclusion of what he described was a perturbing one for the telcos. They will have to spend to give customers much higher bandwidth and much lower latency, which is a concept it's jolly difficult to get over to, well, people like my listeners. It needs new networks, he said. Now, Chris is still obsessed by what sort of animal the telcos actually are. Didn't we have zebras and something else up on the logo one year? We used, yes, zebras and things. Mark thought they were ants because they all do the same thing, which is what they call a takeaway, isn't it? From the floor, we heard the suggestion that nationalization might be the way to get the new super networks, and it was also suggested that net neutrality kills added value. After all that, it wasn't surprising that the first vote was against the idea that telco should just concentrate on building the optimal digital network and ignore apps and content, but it didn't actually tell us what sort of things they should do. A fascinating switch then to the customer experience, if indeed it is an experience at all. Some people argued with that. Phil Jordan of Telefonica said telcos must get away from the hierarchies of product and service and use their data to drive the experience. And Stephen Rome then told us about the extraordinary rollout of Reliance Jio, recruiting 1.5 million customers a day since September the 1st, using the official Indian digital identity scheme to attack the old paperwork. And his conclusion so far: roll things out before they're perfect, and something very difficult, I think, for most telcos, forget about the legacy, which is easily said when you're a startup with billions to spend of your proprietor's money. Vote 2, we decided that telcos can deliver the experience customers expect, whatever that experience might turn out to be, I suppose. And after our rather mechanistic networking session, some insights into life inside the boardroom and a reminder of how difficult it is for business to see how all the things we've been talking about fit together, in Chris's words. This is a cleverly planned event. We move from the here and now into the future in a big way this afternoon. Different problems from the ones telcos have been grappling with up to now, I think. Earlier this year, I encountered something rather interesting in Tennessee. I went to Chattanooga, where 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, the local electricity utility rolled out an extraordinary fiber optic network for the whole city. Financed, it cost $330 million, a big government loan in that, but they raised a bond as well. And to provide 1,000 gigabits a second, the gig they call it. And it's now got, the whole network has 70,000 subscribers or so. The gig itself has about 4,000 subscribers, less than 10% of the broadband people. And of course, the problem, we went to see how it had transformed Chattanooga. What it's really done is boost the psychology of the place. A town that had shrunk and shrunk as industry, hard metal bashing industry, died in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and is engineering a revival around the digital idea. And the gig is a vital part of the psychology of the city, even though it's difficult to track down people who are actually using it to do anything other than play games at warp speed. Now, it gives Chattanooga a curious position. It's an island of superconductivity in the middle of a not very conductive America. And it won't be much use, Metcalfe's law says, until the rest of America is connected up with something like the gig. But of course, then Chattanooga will have lost its competitive advantage. It's a wonderful circular thing going on in Chattanooga. As William Gibson, the American novelist, once said in those memorable words, "The future has arrived, it's just not distributed evenly yet." And that's a wonderful insight into last week's presidential election and telcos. Thank you very much, Chris.